Hi, my name is Alyssa Clark, and I'm a senior athletic training student here at Emory. And the topic of my research is the prevalence of disordered eating behaviors and eating disorders among Division III athletes at Emory College. And just a brief overview of what I'm going to be discussing today. I'll start off with my clinical question, and then lead into my hypotheses, my subjects, testing procedures, data analysis, results, and then I'll end with my conclusion. So the reason that I chose this topic is because I play softball here at Emory, and I understand the pressures that come with being a collegiate athlete. And I've also seen firsthand athletes compromising their food intake in hopes of losing weight in order to improve their performance. Which leads me to my clinical question as how prevalent are disordered eating behaviors among Division III athletes at Emory College? So I did a lot of research on this topic, and the research that I found mainly discussed athletes at higher levels, so D1 and elite athletes I saw a lot of studies on, and also just focusing on strictly females or just strictly males. I didn't see a lot of incorporating both into the studies. So based on previous research, I did see a lot of different patterns, but I concluded with these hypotheses. I predicted that 40 to 50% of athletes would be dissatisfied with their current weight, that 25 to 30% of the athletes would present with abnormal eating patterns, and that 5 to 10% of the athletes would be using methods such as purging, vomiting after meals, skipping meals, or fasting. And then I also predicted that the female athletes would be less satisfied with their weight. So for the subjects in my study, I actually I invited all of the athletes, both male and female, at Emory to participate in my study, but there was only 79 total participants over 8 different sports, and you can see those right here. And it was predominantly of female participants, and then the ages ranged from 18 to 22. So for my testing procedures, I decided I wanted to do a questionnaire, and I ended up instead of sending it to over 400 athletes, I ended up sending the survey and an email to the coaches, which ended up being a limitation of mine. Long story. So I sent an email to the coaches explaining the research, explaining what I wanted to do and get out of it, and then I sent the survey link with that email. And then I asked them to encourage their players to participate in the research. So I came up with some questions at the beginning of the questionnaire, and basically just like demographic information like age, gender, academic year, sport, and ethnicity. And then I also asked if they were satisfied with their current weight. And then the actual survey was the Eating Attitudes Test 26, which I saw a lot in previous research, this test being used. And it's just widely used for screening of characteristics of possible presence of eating disorders. So here's just a glimpse of the test itself. There's 3 different factors or sections, and the way that I scored this, or the way that it's scored, is they answer all the 26 questions, and it's basically a point system. So never, rarely, and sometimes are 0 points, and then often, usually, and always are 1, 2, and 3 points. And then you total the score, and the total number is the athlete's score. And if their score is 20 or higher, then they are susceptible to eating disorder. So the way I analyzed my data, I took all of the scores and put them into Microsoft Excel, and then I coded the data, and then I transferred the coded data into SPSS, and I used a Pearson correlation to compare the scores to gender, sport, academic year, and weight satisfaction. So my results, which don't seem very significant, but there were only 3 out of the 79 athletes that scored a 20 or higher. And overall, there was a 69% of athletes that were satisfied with their weight, and 31 were not. And then also I wanted to look at more specifically females versus males because I wanted to see if my hypothesis that female athletes would be less satisfied with their weight would be true. And it ended up being true that 38% of the females were dissatisfied while only 17% of males were dissatisfied. So I found there was an inverse significant relationship between the E26 scores and weight satisfaction. So basically this means the less satisfied a person was with their weight, the more likely that they would be susceptible to abnormal eating behaviors. And then there were no positive correlations between the scores and gender, sport, or academic year. And this is just one of the correlation tables. This was between the totals and the weight.
So what was your problem with the survey being sent to the coaches?
Okay. Well, so we kind of had to like optimize our time. So instead of sending it all out to all the athletes, we sent it to the coaches. So first, I won't name any names, but for a specific coach, I actually ran into him at the CAF, and he was asking me how my research was going. So I said, it's going okay. I haven't had too many male athletes respond, and his sport was a male sport. And he said, really? And he said, I was wondering why you asked me to take the survey. I said, I didn't ask you to take the survey. I said, I asked you to forward it to your athletes. And he's like, oh, I was wondering why you're asking an old man to take it.
So was his results included within this?
No, they weren't. He ended up saying he didn't even. He realized that.
He just ignored you all the way around.
He ignored you completely, yeah.
Apparently, he didn't forward it because none of his sport was in the results. So overall,
yeah.
So if I could redo this, I would definitely individually email the athletes. It just would have taken a long time, but I definitely know now I could have done that. Be more.
Coaches can't read. That's what you learned from this.
So yeah, there's that. Yes.
Why do you think the numbers were so different between your hypothesis and then the actual results that you had?
That's a really good question. Let me go back to my hypothesis. There was a lot of previous research that I'd found that athletes were dissatisfied, but I think overall it was just the sample size was so small comparatively. So for most of the studies that I had found, there was like 400 some subjects, but with only 79 subjects, it's hard to compare that much data.
Did you base your hypothesis percentages off that research?
Mm-hmm. And going in, I figured there would be more because there's 400 plus athletes at Emory, so I figured that there would be more athletes that would participate, but that didn't happen.
Well, isn't it, and I think this is true, that those athletes, and they are usually female, are those sports that have where form is important, or where they're wearing something tight like volleyball or swimming or gymnastics or I don't know, diving or whatever else you could consider.
Did you look at it between what?
Sports. She did. It just
I just
wasn't.
don't remember.
I did, but there wasn't any significant correlations. Yeah. And then,
numbers in Emory Henry compared to, if you did compare this at all, to the population at large, athletes or otherwise? Did you look at that?
I mean, based off previous research, there was a lot of like elite athletes that I know for the study that I found with elite athletes, there wasn't a lot of it wasn't like a significant amount, but it was more. I think it was higher among the elite athletes than D3, but that's just based off the population that I did. So I think that more research definitely needs to be done. I think that if I could redo it, I would add. I think it'd be cool to incorporate schools within our conference, so more Division III athletes instead of just Emory.